Hello, friends, and welcome to I Know I Belong When, an innovation unbiased production where bold voices, curious stories, and authentic impact amplify knowing you are invited, seen, heard, and needed. I am your host, Christopher Bailone, Principal Strategist at Innovation Unbiased. This is more than a conversation. It is a movement, a mirror, a megaphone, one where raw truth meets radical hope. Welcome back to the show. Get ready, because today's guest is a powerhouse of leadership and inclusion. Simone Morris is not just breaking barriers, she's building bridges. As the CEO of Simone Morris Enterprises, a certified minority and women-owned business, Simone is on a mission to create workplaces where everyone belongs. With 23 years of experience spanning retail, consumer products, financial services, pharma, and tech, Simone has transformed her passion for diversity into a career of impact. She is an award-winning practitioner recognized by Diversity Best Practices, Diversity MBA, and more. And in 2020, she snagged the Bronze Stevie Award for Female Solo Entrepreneur of the Year. From leading employee resource groups to serving as Director for Diversity for Southern Connecticut SHRM, Simone now consults, coaches, and speaks globally, empowering organizations to build authentic, inclusive cultures and develop purpose-driven leaders. So buckle up, friends, because when Simone speaks, inclusion is not just a buzzword, it is a movement. Simone, welcome to I Know I Belong When.
Awesome, Christopher. That was like a warm blanket and hug that I needed to start this conversation. Thank you so much. I love the opening.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I mean, if I'm going to create a culture of belonging, I want to welcome you into the space and make sure that you know you belong here.
Yes, thank you. I feel it.
Wonderful. So, Simone, your work creates spaces where others know that they are welcomed from the start. How do you do that?
I like to say that I model behaviors that leaders can emulate. So I meet leaders wherever they are on the inclusive leadership journey, and everybody is not a convert. Everybody is not on board. So I need to allow space to build trust where you can show up as your authentic self and even say things like, "Why are we here?" And I need to be able to receive that and then model a response for others that are witnesses, allies, perhaps, who want to know how to respond in that manner as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important as practitioners. We sometimes get caught up in our own stuff, and we have to remember that the folks that we are engaging with have not possibly done all the work we have and not have arrived to the summit where we potentially are. And I talk about this where it's one thing, like you're trying to learn how to rock climb and your instructor is at the top and they look down and go, "Hey, like, this is really easy.
Come on up.
Come on up." And you're looking at them and going like, "Well, how am I supposed to do this?" Right?
Yeah.
That instructor needs to come back down where we are at
Yeah.
and then say, "Okay, hand here, foot here, hand here," to help us make that climb. That's our responsibility as practitioners, to help the individual meet them where they're at and help guide them along the way so that we can understand how to best help them on their journey.
I love that analogy so much because I got an immediate visual of rock climbing. And by the way, let me just say this because I'm thinking about when I went to Italy and the Leaning Tower of Pisa and how I had so many supporters like, "Come on up to the top." And even with people that I know, like, and trust, I was like, I'm not going to, like, I was so terrified. I did not go to the top. So I love your analogy because I will say as practitioners, if we do go back down, we also need to realize that people need to be ready when they are ready. So even though we may be a trusted source next to them, they may not come right up because they don't fully. They could trust you, but they may not be ready for the journey. So it's knowing how to sort of dance and allow space to allow people to get some glimmers of awareness where they're curious and they want to know more, and they give you a little bit, and a little bit. So I pride myself on being that type of facilitator, trainer, consultant.
And I think that's why we've gotten along so well over the years, is because we have a similar approach to how we do this work, right? So on this podcast, we say names. It's a big passion of mine, getting somebody's name correct from the start. So, can you share a moment when somebody saying your name with intention made you know you were seen?
Ooh, gosh, I thought you were going the opposite way. I I feel like my whole life I was looking for a keychain when I was younger that said Simone, and I grew up when there was no keychain that said Simone. It used to piss me off, like a mug or a keychain. I couldn't find it. And then I was feeling like when people say Simon to me, it's like a dagger. It's like, oh, it's Simone. And so when the opposite of that happens, I feel seen when someone's like, oh, Simone. And I'm like, oh, yes, yes. I've had somebody call my office and I'm like, hello. And they're like, can I speak to Simon? I'm like, no, it's Simone. And they're like, no, can I speak to Simon? I'm like, gosh, all right, click. So, I think most people do get my name right. On occasion, I do encounter people who are Simon, and that's more prickly for me, the Simon versus Simone.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will have to say, having been born in 1981 and the second most popular name was Christopher, I don't necessarily have that experience, though I will say that most of the time it's Chris, right? The keychains are Chris. It's very unlikely that I see Christopher out there. And so I don't buy those. I will buy the ones that say Christopher because that's my name, right? It's not
Right.
Chris, it's Christopher. So I feel you on that one. And I also know that people who know me, because when people say Chris, I think they're not talking to me.
Mm,
Even if I'm probably the only one in the space, I assume that they're talking to somebody else, right? So for me, names are important, right? That's the
yeah.
first way that we create belonging for somebody is getting their name right. I don't know how somebody would see your name and go Simon, like that just doesn't make sense to me, but
Well, let me interject and tell you that I had a client that was in Ireland and she kept saying Simon. And so I was like, uh, so I said to her, my name is pronounced Simone. And she said in Ireland, the pronunciation is different. And so that allowed
mm,
me to be a little more open because sometimes you can do the work to get my name or to understand and appreciate from a belonging perspective what I go by or ask me if you don't know how to pronounce my name. But that experience was eye-opening for me because then she started telling me a story about if you're a man, this is how it's pronounced, and if you're a woman. And so she was super apologetic, and I could see that she was mortified. So it was a nice education and awareness for me as well.
yeah, because a lot of times, especially those of us who work on a global stage, we are accustomed to those around us knowing what it is, but they were coming with intention, seeing the name spelled on a piece of paper and going, okay, this is how to pronounce it.
Right.
They were trying to get it right from their side, though they misstepped because they mispronounced it. And what a great way to have a conversation and talk about multicultural agility and understanding
Yeah.
about how different language have an impact on belonging. And how are we also thinking about how do we make sure that we're taking our blinders off to other cultures as we are trying to teach them and educate them on the belonging journey and making sure that we are inclusive of their perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fully agree.
So, what practices do you recommend to organizations to ensure names are respected and remembered?
Mm. I recommend vulnerability. And I use the terminology bumble, stumble, grace, rise. And what that means is you do not have to be perfect as an inclusive leader. You are going to mess up. The encyclopedia of cultural nuances, etc., is so great that you don't know it all, including myself over 10,000 hours, thanks Malcolm Gladwell. You don't know it all because you will come across someone who will say something like, wow, I didn't know that. So I encourage leaders to have the mindset that, you know what, I am going to mess up And I'm going to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, I didn't get that right. Please forgive me. Let me go back to grace. The grace is that I give myself some compassion and love. You're human. You're allowed to make mistakes. And you rise. I'll do better next time. I'll do better
Yeah.
next time.
I think grace has to be on both sides, right?
Mm,
We have to make sure that we are giving person grace, coming with the understanding that they might not know that they made a mistake, and giving them the benefit of the doubt. And then we help educate. But then also the person who made the mistake is give yourself grace, right? And say, okay, be humble enough that I made a mistake and move on and not make it about yourself, right? Make it
yeah,
about the behavior, what just happened in the moment. And then we move on and
yeah.
we move forward and we figure out how we're going to rise above and do better next time. So this is a great segue in talking about the moment that you knew that you belonged. So can you describe a defining moment when you truly felt like you arrived and your whole authentic self belonged in a particular space? What made that moment possible? Person, policy, shared purpose, etc.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my old employer, and my background is information technology. In fact, my master's degree is in management of technology. And so I have a body of work around managing global technical projects like SAP implementation. I can't think about that now. But I want to go back to that moment because I had been with the company for a number of years before I got involved in the ERG, the resource group space. And I had felt overlooked for opportunities of advancement. And so I was going along. I had terrific benefits, terrific coworkers, brand recognition from the organization that I worked with. And so, I would say that I was comfortable. And then I got involved in the ERG space. And I remember being invited to sit down with the CEO of the organization. And all my time before, I'm talking a decade, I had never had a one-on-one or a conversation with the CEO about culture. And here, Simone, what do you think? I will never
Mm,
forget that experience because I felt really seen. I felt like a leader, even though I had been leading, but I don't feel like I was in spaces that appreciated my contributions fully. So I was doing a bit of filtering, like what should I say in this meeting? And in the meeting with the CEO, I was authentically Simone. And that was really a pivotal moment for me because it wasn't just the CEO in the room. There were senior leaders in the room, and they were listening to what I had to say about how to improve the workplace culture. And that was a key moment in my career because then I realized the power of my voice that I had not been using because I wasn't in a space that made it feel like my differences were appreciated. But now I was in this meeting that really spoke volumes to me about what was possible.
so when you look back now, do you think that that was the moment when you knew that this was the type of work you wanted to do?
Yes, there was no going back. I had an opportunity to do what was called a secondment or a year in HR and then go
Mm,
back to IT. And I knew definitively with my experience working in HR, working specifically diversity and inclusion full time, that I didn't have the passion to return back to my IT work. So when my year
wow.
was up, I ended up leaving the organization because the choice was to leave or to go back to what I was doing before. And I felt that I had so much access, exposure, passion, all these things that would not allow me to go backwards. I had to
Mm.
continue going forward. And that ultimately led me to starting my own business 2 years later.
Wow. Talk about pivotal, arriving, finding your bold, authentic self and making that courageous decision to say, you know what, I'm not going backwards, I'm going forward. So, wow, what an experience. And all I have to say is thank you, previous employer, because
Yeah.
the Simone that has been around me and others has just been an amazing experience. And so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Shout out to the late Ivan Menezes. I'm not even sure if I'm saying his name right because I always stumbled with his last name, but he was such a kind, empathetic, vulnerable, down to earth. Like he emulated leadership or modeled it in such a way that he really had a huge impact on my life. Also, Jeff Ivy. They changed my life. I saw possibilities and I saw and expected more of myself than how I had been playing previously because it's almost like I got my wings, butterfly. Thanks, Jennifer Brown. I got my wings and I started to blossom and lead more because I had gone the opposite way based
Yeah.
on my experiences or messaging that said you're not capable. The results that it wasn't showing for me, but when I was in that space and when I was with them, they lifted me up. It's almost like they lifted me up and pivoted me and said, "Here you go," and off I
Yeah.
went.
Well, that's amazing. So I know you are somebody who pays it forward. And so, how do you help others recognize and create those moments in their own careers?
Mm. Well, I am a mentor. I am a mother. I would say I have a 10-year-old daughter, so she's watching me and what I do. And so there's that. But I also do mentoring. I'm a part of an organization called Live Girl, which is about creating the next generation of inclusive leaders. And
Mhm.
so I serve in an advisory capacity. So I'm giving back in that way. Like I said, I have mentees that I work with. I do my own podcast, which I feel like is a vehicle to allow others to come and tell their story and pour back into others of how do you get ahead? How do you get into the driver's seat in your career? So I'm doing a lot of different things to give back. I've had interns come and work for the company, local talent. So a lot of things in terms of give back. And of course, the Inclusive Leadership Impact Awards recognizes inclusive leadership excellence around the country and gives a platform to shine a light brightly on inclusive leadership.
Well, that's amazing. You've been doing this for a very long time. And so I know that there are a lot of people out there who hopefully are listening and can go, yep, Simone had an impact on me and where I am at in my career today. So I know you had that impact on me. So I thank you for what you did for me early on and supported my journey and continue to support my journey. So you are continuing to pay it forward. So thank you so much. So
Thank you,
we
Christopher.
have
Let's
to,
pause. What? Let me
yeah,
just pause and receive that in. I'll take the heart in. Thank you for saying that. I don't want to just rush by that. I received that, and thank you so much for saying that.
you're welcome. You're welcome. So we've talked about the good part of belonging. Now we got to talk about the not so good of belonging. So talk to me about a moment when you knew you did not belong someplace. What was happening and what did you do or not do about it?
Yeah. I was thinking about this morning before I came on the show, and I was thinking back to my first moment where I didn't feel like I belong. And it actually goes back to elementary school. When you
Mm,
do this work, you start to get words, language, and awareness that you can then go back into your memory and think about moments. I find myself doing that a lot. So this morning I went back to elementary school. Now, I was born in Jamaica and we moved to the United States when I was 9 years old. So I was in elementary school and I remember this little girl kicking my chair and telling me, go back to Jamaica, and then making fun of the food and saying, you eat curry goat gum. Like she would do all these mean things to me, and I felt helpless. And so from a what was your strategy, I stayed. I didn't have a choice. And my mom was like, you're in school to go to school. You're in school to learn. So I stayed in that environment and just pushed through. So that
mm,
is like a very early memory for me of feeling like I didn't belong and my language was different. So it was noticeable from a language standpoint. And here was someone telling me that I didn't belong and I should go back to where I came from. Now,
ouch.
Yeah. And I think the memory comes up for me because I have a daughter in elementary school and she has some challenges around feeling like she belongs, which is fuel for me to really be a fierce advocate for her, to make sure she's in spaces that are welcoming for her. And when I fast forward to my career, I'm going to jump over corporate America for a moment and just go to being an entrepreneur. I have been in rooms where I feel like my diversity that is not hidden is noticed and I can't do anything about it. So I
Right.
have been in rooms where I am going to advise a senior, I'll say C-suite, a senior leader. I have been given guidance to filter it back. One of the things I took from corporate America is like, I am not going to code switch anymore. I'm going to be
No.
the authentic Simone. So if there's an elephant in the room, I feel like as a practitioner, I need to not just move by it and I need to say something. So I have said things that have not been welcoming, and I have been in a space where I have said it and it was not received. And I was given guidance to really focus on the data, your perspectives and commentary, less of the commentary and thoughts and more of the data. And then I have been in the room where the same company, someone else said what I was trying to say and had a different identity, and it was okay. And so it's challenging to see things unfold, and for me, as I reflect back, I'm like, wow, I feel like I didn't really belong in that space. Like, so I
Mm.
think to your point, the belonging is personally, do I feel welcomed, and are the other people doing their best to make me feel welcomed in the space? So it's a combination. And so in that particular example, I was like, wow, okay, I don't get to be my authentic self. So, and it's sort of like a trigger for me to be like, I got to filter. And it's hard, it's exhausting to filter. So,
It is exhausting to filter. I mean, that's if you're filtering, you're not being your authentic self. And I would just say, like, the hairs were just kind of standing up on the back of my neck when somebody was like, well, don't give your commentary. Well, like, did not they hire you to be the consultant, to give your expertise, to be able to explain the data, right? If you're just focusing on the data, what story is the data telling you? You're there to help them. And so it sounded like it was rather performative and not trying to actually do the work that was necessary to make the change, because apparently they had a lot of work to do.
they did. They did. But again, back to our point in the beginning of this interview, meeting people where they are. You know, we're not fortune tellers, but experience, those 10,000 hours plus, it gives us some insights. We've got
Yes.
access to tools. It gives us some insights that other people can't see or are not courageous enough to be able to see, even if they see it. So the learning and the lesson for me is really being adaptable and flexible to say, oh, this place is not ready for me. And I can even be bold enough to use your language at the beginning of your podcast to say, you know, I'm sensing that we're not in alignment. And perhaps it's time to just take set the stage. But it's always afterwards you're able to be more mature and see these things.
Yeah. And it's understanding about who do they need to help them, right? And how are we best going to help them along their journey? It may, as you say, they might not be ready for you.
Right.
And so who is going to be the best person to get them started along the journey? And then when they are ready for the Simone to come in and give the commentary that they need to hear, then they might actually be ready to receive it, even if it's still uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. And I've had clients who are on the opposite end who are allow me to spot the elephant and name the elephant and for us to have that sort of uncomfortable conversation to get to the other side. So I've had both experiences.
Well, no pain, no gain, right? If we're comfortable, we're not growing. And so we need to be safe. We need to make sure people are safe. However, we need to be uncomfortable. That's what happens when
Yeah.
we go to work our muscles, right? When we go to the gym, it's not
Yes.
comfortable. right? We don't like
Yes.
it. Where it's like we always joke, we pay for this,
Yeah, to see the
but
result.
we're trying to get to a different result, right? And so that's
Yeah.
why we work out our muscles, and so we got to work out our culture. So it's the kind of the same process. Okay, so you hold an interesting seat because you work with so many different organizations, and you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly. So, when we talk about sustaining belonging, what does that look like in a workplace culture?
I often think about the employee engagement survey and what your employees are telling you. And it looks like listening to your employees or having space for employees to contribute authentically. So if your employee survey is telling you flags, and you are not receiving that, you're not allowing feedback to go, or I like to call it input to go both ways, where you're listening to a subset of the organization on how things are, then you likely have a belonging challenge. So if you are doing things, perhaps the employee engagement survey, perhaps focus groups where you're continuously getting information, perhaps a suggestion box, these different vehicles that give you a pulse of what's going on. And if there are belonging challenges, it's not a one and done, like we've figured out this Rubik's Cube, put it down. Like the Rubik's Cube is going to consistently change and you need to be paying attention. Oh, let me try to do it again. It's a constant iteration to create that belonging. So engagement surveys give you an opportunity to give feedback anonymously, also a suggestion box. You need to make sure that the environment is safe to receive the input. And that could mean looking at the managers who have such a impactful role with their direct reports to make sure that they create psychologically safe, meaningful spaces for people to be able to say, I don't feel like I belong. And by the way, the language may come in a different way, in a different package. So someone doesn't have to say, I don't feel like I belong, for it to mean they don't belong.
Right. We have to sometimes make sure that we are actually reading between the lines because if somebody doesn't feel or know that they belong, they're probably not going to come out right and say it.
Right.
And so what are the cues that we're picking up to understand that we got to unearth some things to make sure that people feel safe enough to get to the space where they can say, yeah, I don't know that I belong here. Because just creating that, we know that we've actually created a psychologically safe place for people to actually make that statement, right? Because if they're not saying it, they don't feel safe enough to name the elephant in the room.
Right.
To go back to your analogy. So we have to make sure that we're picking up on those cues to understand what is happening in the organization and how are we helping our clients, our colleagues move forward in the space, get to the psychologically safe space where people can identify what the problem is. And then how do we create the strategies on how we're going to move forward and create, sustain culture, a environment of true belonging.
I will say that what was coming to mind for me was it doesn't always have to be the different diversity segments. So the
Right.
traditional ones, race, gender, sexual orientation, ability. It could also be leadership style. So
Yes.
if someone's preference is introversion and your culture has a message that extroversion wins, or your meetings you don't
Right.
notice that extroversion continues to win, then you miss out on people who are more thoughtful about their response and they need additional time to process, digest, and serve something up to you. So if you don't notice that, there could be somebody in the room who feels like they don't belong and they're not saying it, but their behaviors may indicate to you that there's an opportunity. And you also have to pay attention to things like people over talking. That that
Yes.
that could be, I don't feel like I belong because I'm about to say my idea and someone swoops in like zoop, and it's like, oh, great idea, and off we go down a different, we did a U-turn or something, and you never, as the facilitator or leader of the meeting, came back to say, hey, Christopher, what were you about to say? You just took the U-turn and went down that road. So it can look differently for me from a belonging standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have to go beyond what the societal boxes that we've put people in and think about the other parts of diversity, right? Because if somebody is white, male, straight, able-bodied, and there's two of them, well, there is probably diversity between those two individuals, right? And so how are we helping to understand and work through that there is other diversity categories, metrics that we need to unpack just because two people from a societal point of view identify the same way? And how are we diving into that part of the diversity? Because I do think that we, as an extrovert, somebody who definitely identifies as an extrovert, and I am 90% E, and that,
On
right?
the Myers-Briggs?
On the Myers-Briggs, right? There's no question where I land on that chart. How am I paying attention to my introvert friends, right? And how am I making sure that I'm giving the space that they need to process? Because just because I have come with a quick response doesn't mean my response is better, and doesn't mean that their response isn't better. Sometimes their thoughtfulness and their taking time to respond comes back with, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. And so how are we leaning into using their strength as somebody who sits back and process, and then make sure that we're pulling them into the conversation? We have the responsibility to do that, not just as facilitators, but as coworkers, to be like, hey, Simone, I haven't heard your voice yet in the meeting. Is there something you want to say? Kind of turn to the person next to you at the table and say, make sure that they know that your voice is welcomed and wanted in the conversation. Those out there listening, it's just not up to the facilitator or the leader of the meeting. You have a responsibility sitting at the table amongst your peers to make sure that you are inviting people in and looking around the table and saying, who hasn't spoken? There's a great rule I like to use when I'm facilitating and as a participant. It's called wait. Why am I talking?
Yes. And waste. There's waste as well. Why am I still talking?
Oh, I like that. Okay, I'm writing that down. Oh, wow. Okay. Waste. Why am I still talking? I love that.
That's not a Simone thing. I got that when I was facilitating for YSC many years ago. We used to do wait and then waste. Why am I still talking? Yes.
Oh my God, I love that. Okay, that is now getting added into my vernacular. That's wonderful. Oh, wow. Okay, what a great way to segue to say, why am I still talking? So, Simone, this has been an awesome conversation. We could keep going all day, but we need to bring this plane into a landing. And so to wrap things up, Simone, I'm asking everybody to finish the sentence, I know I belong when. So, Simone, I know I belong when?
I know I belong when I feel seen, appreciated, welcomed, included, all of those things. I know when I belong.
Oh, thank you. Well, my friend, what a riveting conversation. This has been an absolute pleasure and a reminder that belonging is not a destination. It is a practice, and it starts with listening. Friends, if this episode has challenged you to move outside your comfort zone, please follow the show and add a comment about what you will do today to champion a culture of belonging. And we want to hear from you. Finish the sentence, I know I belong when. Send us a voice note. Your story could open a future episode. Thank you for listening. Know that your bold, authentic self is welcomed, valued, and loved. And until next time, remember, you belong here.